الله النور بسم الله النور بسم الله النور بسم الله النور بسم الله نور النور بسم الله النور.
All right, so get ready. We're about to take a deep dive, folks, into some seriously profound concepts. We're going to be exploring the Book of Oneness of Allah, and that's from Al-Kafi.
Yeah, and for those of you tuning in, Al-Kafi, it's a collection of Hadith. Basically, we're talking about sayings, teachings from Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and of course the Imams. You know, it's like this treasure chest, really full of insights into how they understood Allah. And what we're going to do is we'll be focusing on Hadith 276 through 322, and those cover chapters 11 through 17.
So we're talking about the words of the prophets and the Imams themselves, right? I mean, passed down over generations.
Absolutely. So, we got to approach this with respect and reverence,
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's start with something I think a lot of people probably wonder about, and that's like, how can we even begin to understand Allah? Like when we say he's the creator of everything, it's just such a massive concept to try and grasp.
Right. It's a question that's been around for centuries, hasn't it? People have been thinking about this for a long time, and that's what makes Chapter 11 so interesting. It tackles some of the common misconceptions head on. Like one of the big ones is this idea that Allah has some kind of physical form or a body.
Right, right. And, we often hear that Allah is beyond our comprehension, but what does that actually mean?
Well, it gets to, the core of Islamic theology, I think. The concept of tanzih, which means exaltation. It plays a big role here. It emphasizes that Allah is way beyond our limited human understanding. Like, we can't just limit him to physical attributes.
So it's not just that we can't see him, he's invisible or something. It's something much deeper.
Yeah, exactly. It's recognizing that our human minds, right, shaped by this physical world, well, they just aren't equipped to really, grasp his true essence.
So how do the Hadith actually address this?
Well, they're pretty clear about it. So, for instance, you have Hadith 276. It's narrated by Imam Jafar al-Sadiq, peace be upon him, in chapter 11. And what it says is that Allah can't be limited, felt, touched, or seen. So it's a pretty powerful statement, right? It challenges any attempt to kind of define him in these physical terms.
So no boxing him in. We can't say, he's like this or he looks like that.
Precisely. And Imam Ali al-Rida, peace be upon him, echoes this in Hadith 277 from the same chapter. He says, Allah is not a body and he has no form.
Okay, that's pretty direct. So are there other Hadith that kind of reinforce this idea?
Oh, absolutely. Hadith 278, also by Imam Ali al-Rida, peace be upon him, in chapter 11. And this one goes even further. It says Allah is beyond, comprehension, imagination, sight, and measurement. It's like saying any way we try to think about him, it just falls short.
Wow. So everything we can imagine is limited, but Allah isn't.
You got it. It's a humbling realization.
Yeah, it is. Makes you really think about how we even approach this idea of Allah. Yeah. So if we can't rely on, physical descriptions, where do we even go from there?
That's where it gets really interesting. And Imam Musa al-Kazim and Imam Jafar al-Sadiq, peace be upon them both, offer some guidance. In Hadith 279 and 280, both from chapter 11, Imam Musa al-Kazim, he really rejects this idea of giving Allah physical attributes. He's basically saying it's dangerous, to limit the creator.
So it's not just about being inaccurate. It's like it could actually harm our understanding.
Exactly. And then Hadith 281, same chapter, Imam Jafar al-Sadiq, peace be upon him, reiterates this, Allah is the one who gives form and body to creation, but he himself doesn't possess them. It's like a reminder that he's the source of these things, not subject to them.
So it's not just about what Allah isn't. It's recognizing his role as the ultimate creator.
You're getting it. It's subtle, but it's a crucial shift in perspective. And it leads us to another really fascinating question. If Allah doesn't have a physical form, how do we understand his attributes? Does he have knowledge? Can he see? Can he hear? Like, how does that work?
That is a great question. I think it's something a lot of people struggle with. Like, how can something that doesn't have a physical body still possess qualities like that?
You're right. It does challenge our conventional way of thinking, right? Yeah. And that's what chapters 12 and 13 in this Book of Oneness, that's what they're all about. They dive into the concept of Allah's eternal knowledge and essence.
So Allah's attributes, huh? It's kind of hard to even imagine what that means when we can't like, picture him in any way.
Right. It really forces us to think outside the box, See, these chapters 12 and 13, they bring up this whole idea that Allah's attributes are not like separate things he has. They are him eternally.
Okay, yeah, that's already making my head spin a little bit.
Yeah.
So it's not like saying Allah has great knowledge. It's more like that knowledge is just, it's part of him.
Exactly. And to make it even more profound, think about this. These attributes, they exist even without creation. Like take knowledge, for example. We usually think of knowledge as needing something to know, right?
Yeah, like knowledge of, I don't know, a book or a place or something.
Exactly. But Imam Jafar al-Sadiq, peace be upon him, in Hadith 284, chapter 12, he explains that Allah's knowledge, his hearing, his seeing, and his power, they're all eternal. They don't depend on anything. It's like saying even before there was anything for him to know, he already possessed, this perfect knowledge.
Whoa, okay, so even when there was absolutely nothing, Allah still knew. What was there to even know?
Right. That's where our human logic kind of hits a wall. Imam Muhammad al-Bakir, peace be upon him, in Hadith 285, chapter 12, puts it pretty plainly. He says, Allah existed when there was nothing to be known, heard, or seen. So, how do we even wrap our minds around that?
Yeah, I'm starting to see why they call this a deep dive. It's like trying to imagine a color you've never seen before,
That's a great analogy. And this is where we kind of have to let go of our usual way of thinking, Imam Musa al-Kazim, peace be upon him, he helps us with this a bit in Hadith 286, chapter 12. He says that Allah's knowledge is limitless. And not just vast, but actually without any bounds.
Okay, so if it's limitless, it doesn't need an object like our knowledge does. It just is.
You're getting it. You're starting to get to the core of it. And to really solidify this, we have Imam Ali al-Rida, peace be upon him, with a bunch of hadith, 287, 288, and 289, all in chapter 13. They all basically say the same thing. Allah's knowledge existed before creation, after creation, and it encompasses everything. It's eternal and complete.
So it's not bound by time like ours is. It's like a total knowledge, not a knowledge that kind of grows as things happen.
Exactly. And this is where it gets even more mind-blowing. Imam Muhammad al-Bakir, peace be upon him, in Hadith 290, chapter 13, says that Allah hears with what he sees, and he sees with what he hears.
Wait, hold on. What? It's like our senses are all mixed up for Allah.
It is. And it challenges this whole idea we have that attributes are these separate things. For Allah, they're completely unified, this perfect whole. It's hard for us to imagine, but it points to, that big difference between the creator and his creation.
Okay, I need a second to process that one. It's like trying to imagine seeing sounds or something. But it does make you wonder, if Allah's knowledge is already perfect and eternal, do we even have free will? Is everything already decided?
That's the question, right? And chapter 14, it tackles that head on. The key here is understanding that Allah's will, or irada in Arabic, it's an attribute of action, not essence. It comes after knowledge.
So it's not like he's got this plan all laid out from the beginning and we're just puppets, just acting it out.
Not at all. Imam Jafar al-Sadiq, peace be upon him, he clarifies this in Hadith 292, chapter 14. He explains that Allah's will is tied to what he wills, right now. It's not some pre-existing condition.
So he's not forced to will things based on what he already knows is going to happen.
Exactly. To understand this even better, look at Hadith 293. Same Imam, same chapter. It makes a distinction between his knowledge and his will. Allah knows before he wills.
Okay, I see. So his knowledge, it's it includes everything, every choice we could ever make. But his will is what makes it real, what brings those choices into being.
You're getting warmer. It's subtle, but it's really important. We have the capacity to choose, but Allah's will is what gives those choices actual weight, real consequences.
Okay, I think I'm starting to grasp that. But man, it's deep. So how does this willing actually work? Does Allah speak things into existence?
Now this is where it gets really, really mind-blowing. Imam Ali al-Rida, peace be upon him, in Hadith 300, chapter 14, explains that Allah's will is the act of creation. It's a direct expression of his power.
So it's the ultimate, if you will it, it is so.
Exactly. And Imam Jafar al-Sadiq, peace be upon him, he really makes this beautiful in Hadith 301, same chapter. He says, Allah created his will with his will, then created all things by his will.
Wow. That's so simple and yet so profound. Makes you realize how limitless Allah's power really is.
It's humbling, isn't it? And speaking of things that we often misunderstand, how about Allah's emotions? His anger, his pleasure, are those our human emotions?
Oh yeah, that's a good one. We read about Allah's anger in the Quran, but does that mean he's actually feeling angry the way we do?
Yeah, that's where things get a little tricky. But chapter 14 helps to clarify this. See, the key is to remember that even Allah's emotions, they're not the same as ours. They're more like expressions of his will, not like feelings the way we experience them.
So when we read about Allah being angry, it's not like he's having a bad day or something.
No, not at all. Hadith 302 and 303, both by Imam Jafar al-Sadiq, peace be upon him, in chapter 14, they explain this beautifully. They state that Allah's anger is his punishment and his pleasure is his reward. They're consequences of actions, not feelings.
Oh, okay. That's an important difference. It's more like cause and effect, not an emotional response.
Exactly. Which brings us to another fascinating aspect of Allah, his names. Al-Kafi talks a lot about them, but are they just labels, or is there something, deeper going on?
That's a great transition. I've always wondered about, the importance of Allah's names. Why are they so important?
Well, chapter 15 goes right into that. It explores this profound meaning behind those names, They're not just titles. They're a way for us to understand his attributes.
So, like, they're windows into his essence.
You could say that. In Hadith 305, chapter 15, Imam Jafar al-Sadiq, peace be upon him, he talks about a name that has no sound, a word that isn't spoken, a personality without a body. It's like he's saying that Allah's names are beyond what we can express with human language. They point to something much bigger.
Okay, that is mind-blowing. But if they're beyond words, how are we supposed to understand them?
Imam Ali al-Rida, peace be upon him, he offers some insight in Hadith 306, chapter 15. He says that Allah chose names so that we would recognize him and call upon him. They're like a means of connecting, a way for us to relate to him.
So like a bridge between our limited understanding and his, infinite being.
Beautifully put. But there's a catch, right? And Imam Jafar al-Sadiq, peace be upon him, he warns us about it in Hadith 308, chapter 15. He says that just worshiping a name without actually getting its meaning, it's meaningless. It's not enough to just repeat the names. We got to go deeper. We got to understand the attributes they represent.
So it's not just about memorizing. It's about thinking and understanding.
Exactly. It's about really deepening our knowledge of Allah, our connection with him, not just going through the motions.
That makes a lot of sense. So if these names have such deep meanings, how do we even begin to grasp them? What do they actually tell us about Allah?
Well, that's where chapters 16 and 17 come in. They really shine here, They give us these amazing insights into the meanings of specific name. Is like opening up this treasure chest of wisdom.
Oh man, I'm excited to hear more about these specific names and what they tell us. What kind of treasures are we talking about?
Oh, so many. For instance, we have Hadith 309, chapter 16, narrated by Imam Jafar al-Sadiq, peace be upon him. It actually breaks down the meaning of Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, those words we say at the beginning of our prayers. It goes into each part of the phrase, and it reveals how deep and powerful it is.
Yeah, I've always loved that phrase, but I don't think I've ever really grasped the full meaning of it.
It's a beautiful reminder of Allah's mercy and compassion, that it touches everything.
And speaking of Allah's attributes, what other names do these chapters shed light on?
Quite a few. For example, Hadith 310, same Imam, chapter 16. It explains that even though Allah has 99 names, they all point to the same reality.
So it's like they're different facets of the same, diamond.
Exactly. They show us how unified Allah's attributes really are.
Okay, that makes sense. So what about some of the specific meanings behind these names?
Okay, so Hadith 311, chapter 16, this one's narrated by Imam Musa al-Kazim, peace be upon him. He explains that the name Allah itself signifies his dominion over everything. It's like a powerful statement of his authority.
And I remember you mentioned the light earlier. What's the significance of that name?
Oh, right. Hadith 312, chapter 16, narrated by Imam Ali al-Rida, peace be upon him. He says that Allah being the light means he guides everything in the heavens and on earth.
Wow, I'm seeing how each name really gives us this unique perspective on Allah.
Exactly. And it goes even deeper than that. Hadith 313 and 314, narrated by Imam Jafar al-Sadiq and Ali al-Rida, peace be upon them. In chapter 16, they talk about the phrase, the first and the last. It emphasizes Allah's eternal nature, while everything else is, bound by time and change.
Yeah, it's like a reminder that he's always been and always will be.
Powerful stuff. And then there's Hadith 315 from chapter 16, narrated by Imam al-Savi, peace be upon him. It explains what Allah is greatest really means. It says it signifies Allah being beyond all description and limitation.
So our words can never truly, capture his greatness.
You got it. So what about those phrases we use all the time, like glorious is Allah or subhanallah? Do those have special meanings too?
They do. Hadith 318 and 319, narrated by Imams Jafar al-Sadiq and Musa al-Kazim, peace be upon them. In chapter 17, they explore those meanings. They emphasize Allah's distinction and perfection, like reminding us of his unique nature.
It's amazing how much depth there is to those phrases we say, sometimes every day.
Right. And then we have Hadith 320 in chapter 17, narrated by Imam Jafar al-Sadiq, peace be upon him. It explains that the name the One means that everyone acknowledges Allah's oneness, that he's the creator.
So even though we see everything as separate, it all comes back to Allah.
Exactly. And here's where things get even more interesting. Chapter 16 and 17, they go on to explore how the same names we use for Allah and for humans can have really different meanings.
Oh, okay. Give me an example. My brain needs a little break from all these abstract concepts. All right. Get ready for this. Hadith 321 and 322, narrated by Imams Ali al-Rida and al-Hadi, peace be upon them, in chapter 17, they give some fascinating examples. They explain how the One has a totally different meaning for Allah versus humans. Like Allah is truly one in his essence, while humans, well, we're made up of all these parts. Right?
So our oneness is like limited, but his is absolute.
Right. And they also explain how the name subtle has different implications. For Allah, subtle is about his knowledge and design of creation. But for humans, it's limited to our actions and perceptions.
It's like we're using the same words, but we're speaking completely different languages.
That's a great way to put it. In these hadith, they go on to analyze a bunch of other names, like all-knowing, all-hearing, all-seeing, standing, subtle, all-aware, clear, hidden, and subduing. They all show how the meanings shift depending on if we're talking about Allah or humans. It's like a reminder that our language, it can't fully grasp the divine,
Man, this deep dive into Al-Kafi has been incredible. My understanding of Allah's oneness has been like completely blown open.
It's mind-blowing stuff, right? These hadith offer such a rich and nuanced understanding of Allah's attributes.
One of the biggest takeaways for me is this idea that, like, even though we use words to describe Allah, he's ultimately beyond our comprehension. It's like trying to take a picture of the entire universe. You can get a glimpse, but you can't capture it all.
That's a powerful image. It highlights how limited our human language and perception really are. We can use words, as pointers, but they can't fully grasp Allah.
And that's where the beauty of his names comes in, right? They offer us this glimpse, but we got to remember it's just a glimpse.
Exactly. It's like each name is like a keyhole. And when we peek through it, we see this tiny bit of Allah's infinite light. But the full, brilliance of that light, it's just too much for us to see.
So what does this all mean for us, in our everyday lives? How do we take these big ideas and, actually make them part of our lives?
That's the big question, isn't it? And I think it's something we're always discovering. But one thing that really stands out to me is humility. These hadiths constantly remind us just how vast Allah's knowledge and power are, and how little we actually understand. It's like a call to approach our faith with awe and wonder, realizing that we're always learning,
Yeah.
Always growing.
It's like we're standing at the edge of an ocean, and we've just dipped our toes in the water. There's so much more to explore.
That's beautifully put. And that brings me to a question for you listening. Knowing that Allah's names give us this glimpse into his attributes, which name resonates most with you and why? How can thinking about that name deepen your understanding and connection with Allah?
It's such a personal question. And, I think the answer will be different for everyone, depending on where they are in their journey.
Exactly. But no matter which name speaks to you the most, just the act of thinking about it, trying to understand it more deeply, it can bring us closer to Allah.
Well, this deep dive into Al-Kafi has definitely given me a lot to think about. It feels like we've just scratched the surface.
We have, and that's what's so exciting. There's always more to learn, to explore. And as we keep going on this journey, seeking knowledge and understanding, we get closer to Allah.
It's been an amazing journey, and I want to thank you for guiding us through these complex ideas. For everyone listening, if you want to learn more, I highly recommend checking out Al-Kafi for yourself.
It's been a pleasure exploring these ideas with you, and I encourage everyone to keep learning and deepening their connection with Allah.
And with that, we're going to wrap up this deep dive. May this exploration inspire us all to keep learning, growing, and living in a way that reflects Allah's wisdom and mercy. Going through all these hadiths, it really strikes me how much we try to put Allah in a box, with our words and ideas.
It's human nature, right? We want to define things, make them neat and tidy. But when it comes to Allah, well, those boxes they don't work.
It's like trying to fit the ocean into a teacup. And we've covered so much already, right? His formlessness, his eternal attributes, his will, his names. It's a lot to process.
It is. And it's really like just a peek into this vast world of Islamic theology. But even just this little peek, it can change how we see ourselves, our place in everything.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like, take Allah's eternal knowledge, right? It's hard to even imagine that he knew everything even before time like existed as we know it.
Right. It makes our idea of time seem so small. And it makes you think about free will, you know? If he already knows everything we're going to do, does that mean we're not really responsible for our actions?
That's something I've always like struggled with. It's a tough one. But I guess what I'm getting from these hadith is that his knowing doesn't take away our choice. It's more like he sees all the possibilities and we choose which path we actually take.
That's a beautiful way to put it. It's like Allah provides the threads, all the different possibilities, but we're the ones who actually weave the design.
Oh, I like that. So it's not like predetermined. It's more like, I don't know, we're working together in a way.
And it shows how much our choices matter. Every decision we make, every little thing we do, it all adds up to the bigger picture of our lives.
It's empowering, you know, knowing that even with Allah's infinite knowledge and power, we still have a role to play.
It is. And it reminds me of another key takeaway from these hadiths. It's so important to try to understand Allah's attributes, even if we can never fully grasp them.
Right. Like his names, how they give us a glimpse into his essence. But just knowing the names, that's not enough. We have to like really think about their meanings, what they tell us about Allah, and how we relate to him.
Exactly. It's a journey, you know, a lifelong journey of learning. And as we dig deeper into those meanings, we start to see how everything connects. Like how the one points to the unity of all creation, or how the light is about guidance, about knowledge.
Like a puzzle, right? Each piece, each name, helps us see the bigger picture.
And as we put those pieces together, we start to see those qualities reflected in ourselves and even in the world around us.
It really makes you think. It's like recognizing that we have this little spark of the divine inside us.
It does. And it makes me think about how important it is to nurture those qualities, you know, compassion, mercy, justice. If we really want to connect with Allah, to reflect his attributes, we have to live them out in our own lives.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess the question for everyone listening is, which of Allah's names speaks to you the most right now? And how can reflecting on that name help you live a more meaningful life?
That's such a powerful question. And I think everyone will have a different answer, you know, depending on their own path.
Definitely. But, you know, whatever name resonates with you, just that act of thinking about it, trying to understand it better, it can bring us closer to Allah.
Exactly. And as we wrap up this deep dive into Al-Kafi, I encourage everyone to keep searching for knowledge, to keep strengthening your bond with the divine.
It's been a truly amazing journey exploring these ideas with you. And for everyone listening, I really recommend you check out Al-Kafi yourself. It's full of wisdom, and it can really help you understand Allah and your place in the universe.
It's been a pleasure diving into these concepts with you. May this exploration inspire us all to continue learning, growing, and striving to live lives that reflect the beauty and wisdom of Allah's teachings.
Beautifully said. And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive. Until next time, folks, keep seeking knowledge. Keep deepening your connection with Allah, and may peace be upon you all.